Hello, and welcome to Cutting Through. I'm Mitchell Plitnick. This past weekend, uh, there was a notable rupture on the right, particularly in the Republican Party, at the gathering of Turning Point USA. The rupture kind of spilled out outside of the actual event, um, and a lot of it really speaks to an emerging uh, threat and split in this party, some of which can be turned, I think, potentially to some advantage, and other parts of it that are very, very dangerous. So let me start um, with looking at one of the speakers at the Turning Point USA conference, Ben Shapiro. Shapiro, of course, is a far right figure who runs the Daily Wire, is widely seen as a right-wing intellectual, although I think many people would dispute that. Certainly a very fast, competent talker. Um, and I think what we're seeing, Shapiro ended up becoming the focal point, I think, of the split, and what we're seeing is emblematic with him of something that's growing and getting more bitter on the right. We're seeing splits like the one that I'll describe happening not only in sort of, public airspaces and on YouTube and in social media and et cetera, but also in, right-wing institutions with, for example, many people have been leaving the Heritage Foundation, and a lot of the split is focused on the elevation of genuine neo-Nazis, emblemized in their case by Nick Fuentes. Now, obviously, Shapiro, being a religious Jew, has and being someone who's very visibly and openly and proudly, frankly, Jewish. Um, he certainly sees Nick Fuentes as a problem. I'm sure this is an area that most Jews, be they on the left or the right, when it comes to someone like Nick Fuentes, most of us are going to come to consensus on a figure like that. Might make different arguments about it, um, but I think we'll agree on the toxicity of somebody like Nick Fuentes. And of course, Shapiro has a big problem with this, as well he should. But his sort of his approach and the way he was talking about this at Turning Point, not specifically about Fuentes, but about sort of he was trying to present himself as the icon, if you will, of a principled conservatism, principled right wing approach. And I mean, one of the things he said early in his talk was, and I'm quoting here, the person who allegedly shot Charlie Kirk, and of course Charlie Kirk was the man who started Turning Point USA and launched many of these right wingers' careers, who, back to Shapiro here, who, from all the evidence, points to being a gay, trans loving furry. And of course, the crowd bursts into applause at this. Uh, and Shapiro continues to say that if we are going to target ideological people, the radical trans movement treats those who oppose it as threats. We should talk about that. So, I mean, right away, first of all, this is not what all the evidence points to at all. Um, uh, Apparently, the person, Tyler Robinson, who shot and killed Charlie Kirk, um, did have a roommate who he began, some say, saying romantically, who was a trans woman. Number one, that doesn't make you gay. These things, I realize, are a little difficult for some to understand. But this was a young man who, from all reports, was struggling to find his own identity at the time, politically and socially. So, making these kinds of judgments are about who he is, especially based on information coming from sources other than the person himself, are dubious at best, and in this case, hateful. Which is really the point, and so I just think it's important to point out, um, and to examine the fact that a lot of what we're going to discuss here centers around anti-Semitism, but Um, but if you're gonna stand yourself up as a person of principle because you say you're standing against anti-Semitism, which is what Shapiro is doing, um, and you're going to call yourself principled because you're attacking another group of people and defaming them, because the implication here, of course, is that being, as he puts it, a gay, trans-loving furry makes one susceptible to doing off the wall things like shooting famous people like Charlie Kirk. Uh, that is not a principled stand, I think, sort of by definition. So Shapiro moves on to attacking Candace Owens to great applause. He attacked Tucker Carlson over mostly over the Epstein files and other accusations that Carlson has made, basically saying Carlson's dishonest. It's sort of interesting because one might say by attacking Owens, who is not going to be at that conference because she has gone on her own rampage, which I'm going to spend a lot of time on later. Um, she's been attacking TPUSA. Carlson was going to speak after Shapiro. So Shapiro was not worried, and I think that should be pointed out because I've seen some people defending Owens by saying, well, Shapiro attacks her and she's not even there. Well, Carlson was. Um, and Shapiro goes on to this whole sort of speech, but what was interesting was what he did not talk about. He did not mention Israel and the controversy over policy towards Israel. He did not discuss that. And that had to be um, a painful omission for him because he knew that wasn't a winning subject. What was interesting about this is that there was some polling, and more than half the people there saw Israel as an ally, but not as um, a super ally, if you will, a really close ally. So as an allied country, they certainly most did not support continuing to give Israel taxpayer-funded weaponry. That's been clear for some time. My recent article in Mondo Weiss shows the polling on this among Republicans across the board, and especially younger Republicans who are the focus of TPUSA, strongly against that. So, Shapiro is no fool. He knew this, and so he wasn't going there. He had other fish to fry in this regard, and he was not going there. He also, and I think this was more important, chose not to talk about the sort of, as he talked about America and his conservative values, he stayed away from religion almost entirely. And that was interesting in light of the remarks that I'll discuss momentarily from Vice President J.D. Vance, who very much went into this into this point. So I think, for all of Shapiro's insistence that he's a fighter for principle and moral courage, he stayed away from the scary fights on this one. He stayed away from the tough jargon. He tried to stake out, and I think he succeeded, a safe position, uh, defending what I think this crowd would see as classical conservatism, although I think it would not be particularly recognizable to the conservatives of the 1980s of Ronald Reagan, and certainly to those preceding them of Barry Goldwater and that sort of ilk. But it wasn't the brave speech that he tried to set it up to be. After that, J.D. Vance made his speech, and there was just lots and lots of anti-immigrant stuff in it, and talked about building an ICE army. One of the things that I really thought that was worth sharing and worth just commenting on, he said, and I quote, Omar Fatah, who ran for mayor of Minneapolis and lost. Omar Fatah was Ilhan Omar's candidate for mayor of Mogadishu. Oh, I mean Minneapolis. Little Freudian slip there. That's what he said. A little memo to Vice President Vance. Omar Fatah was born in Washington, D.C. Can't get a whole lot more American than that. Your disgusting and racist implication uh, which brought up echoes of the birtherism crap about Obama, and particularly the attack on the racist attacks on the Somali American community that have been launched by the President of the United States in recent days. I mean, you're going to stand up there and tell me, and so much of J.D. Vance's speech, it should be stressed, was based on this idea of we don't care who you are, come to us, we are conservatives, as long as you're a proud American, you can be whatever, you can be black, you can be gay, you can be this and that. This was the theme of Vance's speech. And I think this pretty clearly shows the reality that hides under Vance's speech. I mean, it's bad enough to impugn an American citizen like Ilhan Omar, who is an immigrant but is an American citizen, and her citizenship, according to our Constitution, Mr. Vice President, is as valid as anyone else's. Once you're a citizen, you're a citizen. Doesn't matter how you got there. Okay, that's number one. But Omar Fatah was born here. Yes, he is a Somali American. Um, his parents were immigrants from Somalia. He is an American in every sense by the Constitution and by any definition of common decency. So I think we see here J.D. Vance's true face. And, let's not lose sight of the fact that when he was listing all the evil people who he is fighting the noble fight against, one of the groups that he listed on that list was, quote, the Soros district attorneys who cheered on as their cities burned. So a little, nice little bit of anti-Semitism in there. I don't know what the hell Soros has to do with district attorneys anywhere. But just to make sure that he wasn't missing out on the anti-Semitism vote. His speech basically was all about a Christian nationalist American identity. As he said, it's an obvious truth. Americans are hungry for identity. We're hungry for belonging. And at another point, he said, the only thing that has truly served as an anchor of the United States of America is that we have been, and by the grace of God, we always will be a Christian nation. Now, for those of you who've ever studied history, even on the most basic level as a high school student, maybe, you will know that is nonsense. Most of the founding fathers were deists, not Christians. Deism is related to Christianity, but it is not exactly what these people mean, certainly by Christianity. But regardless, the whole point of the Bill of Rights and their inclusion in the Constitution was that we have freedom of religion. That we are not, there shall not be a state religion of any kind. That was the point. There is nothing in the Constitution that says that most Americans have to be Christians. Most Americans, in fact, more Americans are Christians than any other religion by far. That is true. But many Americans are atheists. Many Americans are agnostic. Many Christians aren't particularly practicing, nor are they necessarily all that educated in Christianity. Just as many Jews are not all that educated in Judaism and Muslims not all that educated in Islam. Vance, however, was concerned that the liberal media would twist his words, so he explained a little further. And he said this: I'm not saying you have to be a Christian to be an American. I'm saying something simpler and truer. Christianity is America's creed, the shared moral language from the Revolution to the Civil War and beyond. An interesting, that is an interesting sort of timeline that he uses, but okay. Across that history, our country's major debates have always centered on how we could best, as a people, please God. Have they? Really? Oh, I mean, that's really interesting. Because we've had a lot of people who've been certainly very involved in this country and in the public debates who had no interest in God whatsoever, who had no uh, no religious affinity, who'd never brought religion into their discussion. In fact, that has been more common than not, that people talk about uh, what should be, what the ideal society is. Often it's on very pragmatic terms, which not even taking morality into account. And very often when we talk about policy, we're talking on very basic, pragmatic terms. Um, and then other people bring ethics into it from a variety of sources, not all of which are religious. Some philosophical. It is this concept and this very, I think, narrow-minded concept that somehow morality flows from religion. It does not. It can, but that is not the exclusive source. He said elsewhere that our famously American idea of religious liberty is a Christian concept. I mean, that I can't even begin. I mean, Christianity is an extremely proselytizing religion. Okay, so that's number one. And we know for a fact, historically, that proselytization has often come with an enormous amount of cruelty and coercion. So, you know, that that is an utter absurdity, not to mention the fact that the early colonizers uh, who came here and slaughtered the people that they found here. I guess that's a Christian concept too, according to J.D. Vance. But those people that came here, supposedly, many of whom, most of whom, were fleeing one type or another of religious persecution, were coming from Christian countries. They were coming from European Christian countries. So, where this is just complete ahistorical nonsense. Vance then said, freedom of religion transformed into freedom from religion. Now talking about how the Democrats have perverted all of this stuff. And in a public square devoid of God, we got a vacuum, meaning, of course, a moral vacuum. It's not what happened. In fact, quite the opposite. What we got, and what we've always had in a public square devoid of God is a public square that celebrates diversity, that celebrates freedom, that celebrates choice, that celebrates people choosing their own paths and not having to base or even if you're not going to say that you're forcing other people to become Christians, um, people don't have to base the validity of their own beliefs on whether or not it's acceptable to Christians. That's what we got. That's what a public square devoid of God does. Public square devoid of God is not a public square devoid of morality. In fact, in many cases, it's quite the opposite. Ask the victims of the Inquisition. Ask the victims of the Crusades. I mean, we can go on and on, and talk about people who did things in the name of Christianity much more recently, uh, and continue to do so. Ask Fred Phelps if you'd like. Vance also mentioned Robinson, the Tyler Robinson, the man who shot Charlie Kirk, saying he became addicted to porn, he became addicted to hate, and he ended up sleeping with somebody who doesn't know whether they're a man or a woman. So, let's not miss an opportunity for anti-trans hate here. Um, Not to mention the fact that, maybe J.D. Vance, who famously had sex with a couch, should not be casting aspersions at how other people are dealing with their own sexuality. The sum of all that from J.D. Vance is that, and I think you can go and read the transcript of his speech, and I think it comes very clear when you read the full context. His ambition is very clearly to make this a Christian nation, a Christian state. Whether or not there's an official state religion, he might avoid that just to adhere to the letter of the Constitution. But I don't think, beyond, but the spirit, I think, will be completely destroyed. This is who J.D. Vance is. And I think if you're Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu, atheist, agnostic, any of these things, and there are many other religions that are practiced in this country, should be very concerned about that, about what that means, because that ushers in certain concepts that none of us, I think, are going to be very comfortable with. But let's get to the real star of the show, shall we? And that is, of course, Candace Owens. Candace Owens, I did a video on her recently, And I think um, some of you may have seen it, and she has really gone on the anti-Semitic warpath. I don't think there's any other way to put that. Um, she has, some people would like to say that she has talked about Israel and is anti-Zionist. This is not anti-Zionism, folks, by any stretch of the imagination. It is not anti-Zionism. It is pure anti-Semitism. There is no other way to describe it. And I think we need to be very conscious of what she's doing because, on the one hand, you've got Ben Shapiro and you've got J.D. Vance. And they are promoting a certain kind of Christian nationalism that I think is dangerous to Jews. The thing that's the person that's fighting against them now is Candace Owens. And the problem is that because she has included a critique of Israel, and we'll get to Tucker Carlson, who's also included a critique of Israel. We'll get to him in a bit. But the fact that she has included a critique of Israel in her diatribes has made some people sympathetic to her, and that is a grave mistake on many, many levels. How bad is she? Well, you know, I think we can look and just see what she's saying, and and I think it becomes pretty clear. So let's first give a listen to some of this, and I want to give credit, a shout out to the Majority Report, Sam Cedar, because this video, it was just the easiest. Hers, I found her full video. You can find it yourself on YouTube if you want. But this was just the easiest way for me to get the pieces of it that I wanted. So shout out to the Majority Report. That's where I got this from.
With it, this one is so fully off of the mother effing plantation and the midget horse that you rode in on. And I say that on behalf of the world. I know you're going to get applauded by Konstantin Kisin and Andrew Christ is King Clavin and all of the people, the men who have to keep applauding what you do like you're a 4-year-old to make you feel good. But the rest of the world can't stand you. You're obnoxious. You have absolutely no values that exist outside of the Talmud. You describe yourself.
Okay. That, I think, shows kind of the root of the rest of the things I'm going to show you. So she really has it in for Ben Shapiro, because Shapiro fired her because she was going off too far, mostly based on her anti-Israel views. So he fired her from The Wire because he supports Israel very strongly. This has been a feud between them, and it's escalated, and we're at this point. So, look, she has nasty things to say about Ben Shapiro. Fine. I have no particular problem with that. But when she gets into the Talmud, and believe me, she knows how to pronounce it correctly. I'm sure of that. I've heard her pronounce it correctly before. So this Talmud that she's talking about is an intentional distortion. Ben Shapiro is not hateful because he is a quote unquote Talmudic Jew. First of all, I don't know what a Talmudic Jew necessarily means. These things are far more complicated. And again, this is a cautionary tale to lots of people, because a lot of people they hear a quote from this piece of the Mishnah Gemara, that piece of the Mishnah Gemara, and they say, look, this is what Jews believe in. It's so horrible. The Talmud is a recording of discussions. That's what they are. That's literally all they are. They are discussions about Jewish law, what is the right and the wrong. There are discussions about how that's derived, what they believe. That's all it is. It is a discussion of these things. Various rabbis will tell you, well, this person was right and this person was wrong, and that differs actually among different groups of rabbis, frankly, different groups of scholars. The Talmud is a discussion, and yes, inside the Talmud there are some things that are very hateful. And I say this again, having studied the Talmud, unlike most of the people who talk about it, like Candace Owens. The idea that any, good or bad, of who Ben Shapiro or any other Jew is comes from. That comes from the Talmud is a serious, serious distortion based on ignorance of what the Talmud is. Um, Again, it is a discussion. Yes, Jewish law is derived from the Talmud. Okay, we there are books written. The Talmud itself is commentary. The Gemara is commentary on the Mishnah. The Mishnah is commentary on the Torah, the Tanakh, if you prefer. And there are books that are commentary on the Talmud. And through all of that, you have various traditions, and they are not identical. There are different traditions, especially among Hasidic and ultra Orthodox Jews, who go by the interpretations of different sages. And to pull quotes out of the Talmud and say, look, this horrible thing that Jews believe. I mean, not only is it ridiculously reductionist, but it's pure bigotry. No different than people who pull a Quranic or Hadith quote out of context and say this is what all Muslims believe. Okay, these are vast tomes of thousands and thousands of pages. There are people who spend, for better or worse, their whole life studying the Talmud. And when they die, they will they are not going to say, "Yes, I finally learned it all." It is a lifetime pursuit that you never get to the end of. And you think you could pull a quote out of that and say this is what it means? If you do that, you're simply acting out of ignorance. Okay. You can contextualize and make a case out of Talmudic arguments for all sorts of things, but you need a hell of a lot more depth than just reading a line and pulling it and putting it in pull quotes to be able to do that. So, as soon as Candace Owens goes there to the Talmud, we can already see where she's going. She's going to a place of ignorance. And if we're not sure that that place of ignorance is also a place of hate, well, guess what? She's going to let you know what it is real, real quick.
And I encourage other people at home to learn what is in that Talmud so that you know what Ben thinks of you, because he doesn't just hate me, he hates you too, white men. He hates all Black people, okay? If he's following the rules of the Talmud, I mean, when I say hates, they think that we're animals, that they have a right to own us, that they have a right to make us worship them, that they have a right to lie to us.
And you also,
they have a
I'm
right
sorry,
to sue us.
Here's another, she is basically saying that.
So let me be really clear on this. This is pure anti-Semitism and it's pure lies. Okay. There are racist rabbis in the Talmud. There are racist rabbis today. There are racist priests. There are racist imams. There are racists of whatever you want to say. Again, the Talmud is a discussion. So that's number one. This is not, and she knows this. Okay, this is not just her attacking Ben Shapiro. Let's get that out of the way. Now she's moving on, not past that, but broadening that to attacking all Jews. This idea that unless you're completely dismissive of the Talmud, well, most Jews are not dismissive of the Talmud, even those who've never studied it and don't live by it at all. Okay, so this this argument, if I have to call it that she's making is simply a way of spreading hate. And you can think, I'm sure most of you know Jewish people. I think you know that this is bullshit. I think you know it when you see it. So it's kind of shocking, I guess, to see it laid out there in such a blatant way. But trust me, she keeps going and it gets worse.
Of course, what followed Ben Shapiro on stage is somebody who Charlie Kirk loved very much, and we fought for to the very end against the Jewish donors who were pressuring him, some of them because Ben Shapiro insisted that they do.
Look, I mean, this is this is getting to the point of absurdity. Are there Jewish donors to the Daily Wire, to TPUSA, who say, "Listen, I would like you to say this. I would like you to say that." Sure, absolutely, there are plenty of Christian donors too. Plenty of lots and lots of whatever group you want to say donors. Unfortunately, these right-wing outlets are very, very well funded. Ben Shapiro is well funded. If you think Ben Shapiro is taking his marching orders from donors, I think you know you're naive at best. The especially in areas like this where people have to, somebody like Ben Shapiro has to think about what he puts out there. It's one thing. This guy says, "Well, I'm giving you $500,000. So I want you to say X, Y, and Z." If X, Y, and Z is going to undermine Shapiro's future, is going to undermine, is going to piss off his audience and going to make people unsubscribe and not watch him, well, then that donor is not going to say, "Hey, thanks so much for doing that. Here's another 500,000." That donor is going to say, "Well, you're not really worth anything anymore because you've lost your audience." Um, this notion that donors simply buy stuff is overblown. And again, it's an oversimplified version of the way things work. And as somebody who has run several different nonprofits, as well as worked in and on media and dealt with donors and et cetera, it is a much more complex relationship than you think it is. Most of the time, donors give to, and this is true of politicians, of streaming shows, of public figures, whatever. Donors, for the most part, give because they already like what you're doing. They don't give so they can get you to do what they want. Okay. There are, of course, exceptions, and certainly in politics, where you have people out there who might not take strong stances on particular issues. Um, you know, that's where the donor might come in and say, "I would like you to stand for this," and since it's not their issue, they just go along with it, or maybe they don't know about it, or they just don't want to get into a fight. Things of that nature certainly happen and are quite common, in fact, and it's how lobbying groups and PACs make their living. But this notion that people are out there being mouthpieces for donors is nonsense. It's just not true. It goes the other way around. The donors find the people who are already saying what they like, and they promote them. They give them the resources to reach a wider audience. It's what they do. But that's not really what Candace Owens is talking about, is it? I mean, she's talking really about Jewish control of the media. That's what this is. Singling out Jewish donors as if they're the only donors to Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire is absurd. Okay, it's just is. Just go look up and see who gives to them. They get money from lots and lots of sources that are not in any way Jewish. In fact, quite the opposite. So this is just more of Owens, being who she is. And who she is somebody who enjoys spreading anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. As it happens, she's weaponizing those because she's also really mad at Ben Shapiro. But she's trying to kill two birds with one stone, and actually, many, many more birds than that, because she's trying to endanger all Jews everywhere. So let's hear some more from her.
And am, and will continue to fight and ask questions about who killed Charlie. For you to wake up to these people who believe that they are contract lords. I challenge Black Americans to wake up to your true history, because your quarrel is not with white men. Okay? Wake up to who publishes these books and keeps us warring with one another. Christians versus Christians, right? Christians versus Muslims. Wake up and learn the true history of slavery, because that wasn't exactly a white men sport, okay? Jewish people were the ones that were trading us. Jewish people were in control of the slave trade. Positive. Oh my God.
I mean, you heard the reaction from the Majority Report hosts, Sam and Emma. Look, let me get into this just in case you're not familiar with the issue. Were there Jews who owned slaves? Sure, a handful. It was a tiny number, as Jews in the world are a tiny number. Jews owned something like a couple of dozen of the slave ships out of thousands upon thousands of them over the years. So, were there Jews who were involved in the slave trade? Yeah, there were. So, I mean, the idea that you go from that to your problem is not with white men is insane. Um, Absolutely insane. It's I mean, it's beyond ahistorical. But think about what she's doing here. Okay, she's speaking directly to black people and telling them it was never really white people. It was always the Jews. It's a sort of perversion of the classic Nazi trope that says that Jews are trying to control or trying to mobilize an army of black people to wipe out the white people. This is neo-Nazi trash. And so she's kind of taking her own little slant on that and actually going back and saying that the slave trade was never about white men doing this to black people. The insanity of that is incredible, but as mind-blowing as it is, you hear that and you're like, who could believe it? Unfortunately, a lot of people can believe it. A lot of people can believe it. There has been pseudo scholarship about Jewish involvement in the slave trade. Never, by the way, to this extent. No one that I'm aware of ever tried to claim that it was just Jews who were, here, of course, Candace is defining Jews as non-white. Um, Although she's certainly speaking about Ashkenazi European Jews. But I am unaware of anyone who goes so far as to say Jews were the slave trade. Um, she does. She goes right there. And should we be surprised? She's citing the Talmudic Jew, a book that was written in the 19th century by an absolutely notorious anti-Semite, well known, by the name of August Rohling. Um, he was a German Catholic theologian. And he absolutely hated Protestants and hated Jews and wrote his hatred out very clearly. This text has been discredited for a long time. Unfortunately, as you can see from the book that she held up, which had a nice shiny new cover, it's still in circulation. It's just it's another text of hate of similar to the Protocols of the Elders of Zion and other classic anti-Semitic texts. And most of them have been debunked. Most of them people realize are nonsense, but they're dangerous. They remain dangerous. They've been dangerous and they are still dangerous. And I think Candace Owens is showing you exactly why, because she's using these misguided and twisted ideologies to convince people, and particularly she's targeting black people, but she's trying to convince everyone that all the ills in the world are caused by Jews. She's trying to mobilize. And why do I need to point this out? There's plenty of other people that are pointing this out about Candace Owens. The reason that I put it out is that anyone who follows me knows how much work I'm doing and how much work I have done. And my career has been based in Palestinian rights. And as a Jewish American, I've always felt that one of the most important roles I have in fighting for Palestinian rights is to make sure that is to work very hard to combat the tendency of Israel and Israel supporters to call every criticism of Israel and every call for Palestinian freedom anti-Semitic. That's a nonsense line. It is an insult to every Jew, including myself, who's ever suffered from anti-Semitism. And it's a big part of what I do. And Candace Owens here, because she has also co-opted pro-Palestinian language, and by the way, so has Tucker Carlson, and both of these people in a different way. Carlson is not nearly as rabid an anti-Semite as Owens is. He's more subtle, but Carlson has for years and continues to propagate the Great Replacement theory and other anti-Semitic ideas like that. So, Owens is not alone, but Carlson also goes out of his way to say, I'm not really anti-Semitic. He is, and he always has been, and he still is, and he is dangerous. But Candace Owens, if people take her seriously, is even more dangerous. And she's dangerous, as I'll get to after we watch the last clip that I'm going to show you. She's dangerous also to the Palestine freedom movement. But let's first watch this last clip, and then I can get a little more into that.
Okay.
What?
Jewish people were the ones that were trading us. Jewish people were in control of the slave trade. They buried a lot of it, but it's there and you can find it. I think all of us need to wake up to this because it's making me absolutely sick that he is so bold that he dare sit near Charlie Kirk's chair, that he dare grace that stage when Charlie Kirk knew exactly what Ben Shapiro was and will always be. So again, on your belly, Ben Shapiro.
The last line, and I really wanted to point that out, this on your belly thing, and she earlier had compared Shapiro to a lizard, which, as some of you may know, is another recent anti-Semitic. Though this one is so absurd that I think few people really buy it. Jews are somehow, lizard people. Um, a few fairly big names have been caught up in this nonsense, but um, it's she's hearkening back to that. So, look, I get that she hates Ben Shapiro. Look, I hate Ben Shapiro. Okay, I'm not here to defend Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro stands for everything I'm against, in so very many ways. But if you attack Ben Shapiro because he's Jewish, you're no better than anyone else. You're no better than any other racist. You're no better than any other bigot. And fundamentally, what we're seeing now is a concerted attempt, and it's on several levels. You've got Candace Owens, you've got Tucker Carlson, who, as I said, uses anti-Israel rhetoric to make you believe he's not really anti-Semitic. He is. He has said it. He has not repudiated these things, and I think that's the dividing line. If you want to say, "Okay, I was wrong," back then, I was wrong. Carlson was on for years going on about the Great Replacement theory, and the Great Replacement theory is, Jews will not replace us. That was what inspired the Charlottesville protests, and none of that gave Carlson any pause. And he's never repudiated it. He's never never said I was wrong about that. I need to go back on that. I was wrong. Okay, that would be different. Okay, but when he suddenly finds the Palestinian cause to be such a noble one, people, come on. What do you think that's about? This is not a man who's fought for the equality and freedom of people. This is a man who, as Russia was invading Ukraine, went to Russia to show the world how wonderful Russia is. And in that, he's very similar to Ben Shapiro, because Ben Shapiro will, while genocide is happening in Gaza, go to Israel to show the world how wonderful Israel is. So, these are all different levels of things that threaten to undermine the Palestinian movement, because the truth of the matter is that the hope of Palestinian freedom, the hope to attain Palestinian rights, that's what the struggle is about. People talk about, a one-state solution, a two-state solution. It's never been my approach. Palestinians need to determine their own future, and that future may not fit neatly in one state or two states or any of the other things that have been prescribed by largely the United States and Europe to some extent. They may have their own idea of what their future looks like, and they have every right to pursue whatever that is. Okay. But if we allow that movement to support those rights to be co-opted by people whose agenda is hating Jews, be it Candace Owens, be it Tucker Carlson, be it Marjorie Taylor Greene, a woman who talked about, Jewish space lasers starting the biggest fire in California history, a woman who objected to the Antisemitism Awareness Act, not because it would have made criticism of Israel illegal. She had no problem with that. She objected to it because it would have criminalized anti-Semitic hate speech. She wanted to be able to put out anti-Semitic tropes, like the Jews killed Jesus, and she specifically said that. You say I can't say the Jews killed Jesus? And I mean, we can talk about the question about freedom of speech or whatever, but let's be very clear. This woman has not picked up suddenly thought of a conscience and said, "Oh, the poor children in Gaza are suffering so much." Okay, this is a woman who's on record as not giving a damn about Palestinians, has said it many, many times, backed Israel to the hilt until she had a personal gripe against Donald Trump, and then turned on all of his policies that she could. And suddenly, found that Palestinians were being killed by Israel. So, when people allow these, anti-Semites, yes, to co-opt the Palestinian rights movement, we got a big problem. This is not to say there are people on the right, there are Republicans, especially young Republicans these days. And I just, again, look in the comments, I will, or in the description of this video, and I'll link to the article I just wrote about a recent poll that shows young Republicans falling out of love with Israel very fast. There are people on the right who do have a conscience, who do care that we are supporting a genocide. They that want that to stop. They do care that we're supporting an apartheid state. Okay. Some of them may care because they don't believe that the United States should be giving money to any foreign country. But that's not anti-Semitism. Okay. But when you align yourself with the people who are there because of their hatred of Jews, and that includes Candace Owens, and that includes Tucker Carlson, and that includes Marjorie Taylor Greene, all in different ways. And Greene and Carlson, as objectionable as they are not nearly as noxious as Candace Owens, who's literally putting out outright Nazi propaganda. But that's why this is important. It matters. On the other hand, and this is really, I think the key thing, that should not and cannot, must not stop people who support Palestinian rights from being willing to work with right-wingers who also support Palestinian rights, even if it's not for necessarily the same reasons. It depends what those reasons are. If the reasons are that they hate Jews, then yeah, that's not a good thing. And that will undermine the Palestine solidarity movement. But if it's simply because they are isolationists and they don't want, they feel like, hey, we cut off money to kids who are now dying of AIDS in South Africa. Why should we give money to Israel who are killing kids in Gaza? If that's their point of view, that it's just about not giving money to any of these other countries, okay, I mean, that's valid. That's a solid political thought. It's not mine. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with the perspective. But if it's coming out to the same place, then yeah, we're good. So I think that's the line that we need to hold. It's really, really important because people like Candace Owens are a serious threat. Because people who think, well, anti-Semitism is not a problem, you're right. It's not a huge problem today as much as it's sometimes made out to be. The ADL has intentionally blown up its figures of how many anti-Semitic attacks there are to scare Jews into continuing to support Israel. They've done it because they've done it by using anti-Israel statements and calling them anti-Semitic. It's a dirty trick. The ADL is as big a problem as, certainly as Marjorie Taylor Greene or Tucker Carlson. That all of that is wrong and bad. And but if we actually allow the Palestine movement to embrace people like Candace Owens, like Tucker Carlson, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, then Israel will have the ammunition, the political ammunition, the discursive ammunition that they need to convince people to come back into their fold. Maybe not all of them, maybe not to the extent that there were, but we need more. We're not at the point of breaking the support that the West, the United States and Europe give Israel as it becomes a worse and worse apartheid state and as it commits genocide against the Palestinian people. And ultimately, the Palestine cause is one of morality. And it can only be won if we maintain the moral high ground. That's the only way that wins politically in the West. And in order to do that, we have to, as most Palestinian leaders are already doing, Palestinian Americans, from the most moderate to the most radical, have been denouncing people like Candace Owens, people like Tucker Carlson, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene. You see it from Palestinians all over the place. From some of the white people who, particularly, who claim to be solidarity activists, sometimes that's where it gets shaky. But all of us count in this movement because any of us can open up the whole movement to that sort of vulnerability. And a movement for any kind of justice that tolerates the views of Candace Owens to any degree is going to lose. So please like, share, and subscribe. If you can support this work, it is deeply appreciated. You can see on your screen how you can do that. You can see in description links to places to donate. And if I don't see you again before the holidays, Happy New Year, Happy Yule, Happy Christmas if you celebrate it. And I'll talk to you soon.